What if the place you were born wasn't on any map? Because it was never meant to let you leave alive, hidden in the shadows of the Appalachian backwoods, where cell signals die and names are whispered only in fear, lies a forgotten town with a secret older than America itself. When Lenley Hale returns after 27 years carrying nothing but a locked wooden box and a name cursed in blood, she's not just confronting her past. She's walking straight into a ritual that never ended. This isn't fiction. This is buried history clawing its way back. Watch it till the end, because the deeper you go, the harder it is to crawl out. No one had set foot in Elders Hollow in over a decade, not willingly, at least. Locals called it the place that sleeps with eyes open, a patch of earth so thick with silence. Even birds refused to fly over it. But when Lenley Hale stepped off that Greyhound bus with nothing but a rusted key and a wooden box marked, "For when the silence breaks," something shifted. Her return wasn't just unexpected, it was unforgivable. The town's name had been erased from records, its church bell frozen mid-ring, and the old bloodline homes padlocked by hands long since buried. Yet, here she was, wearing her mother's necklace, a sigil that hadn't been seen since the fire. But what Lenley didn't know was that the town had been waiting for her, and it was hungry. What came next wasn't a welcome. It was a summons. And once she opened that gate, there would be no going back. Some towns vanish from maps. Elders Hollow was never meant to be found. Hidden deep in the Appalachian Mountains, where the fog clings to the trees like whispered secrets, and even the wind seems to avoid calling your name, lies a valley wrapped in silence and blood. They say Elders Hollow isn't haunted. It's guarded. Guarded by oaths older than the country itself. Bound by a covenant no one remembers making, but everyone's still paying for. Generations have vanished here, not in accidents, but in patterns. And those who speak its name above a whisper, they say their shadows walk differently after. What's terrifying isn't just the emptiness, it's the feeling that something's listening when no one's there. Local maps skip it. GPS reroutes you. Postal records stop 3 miles out. It's as if the town uninvites you before you ever arrive. But somewhere between fact and folklore, there's one name that keeps coming back: Lenley Hale. The girl who disappeared. The name carved behind the church bell. The last known bloodline. And as rumors swirl like mist around the valley floor, a single truth claws its way out. Some blood oaths aren't written to be broken. They're written to return. She came back with nothing but a locked box and a name the town tried to forget. After 27 years of silence, Lenley Hale stepped off a faded Greyhound bus and onto the cracked road that once led her away from Elders Hollow. Time had carved deep lines into her face, but her eyes held the same storm they did the night she vanished. Locals barely recognized her if they dared to look at all. She didn't speak, didn't wave, didn't cry. Just walked with deliberate steps toward the only house left standing, with her family's name nailed above the door in rusted iron. In her hands, she carried a small wooden box, scarred, sealed shut, and bound with a strip of red twine so old it looked like dried blood. She never explained where she had been, never told a soul why she came back. And when the old postmaster asked what was in the box, she whispered, "Something I promised I'd return." When the silence ends, no one pressed her further. Because deep down, they all remembered the last time Lenley made a promise and the fire that followed. But what no one realized was this: the box wasn't the only thing returning to Elders Hollow. Something else had followed her home. It wasn't the town that changed, it was the way it watched her. Elders Hollow felt smaller than Lenley remembered, like the land itself had shrunk inward, folding in on secrets it no longer dared to carry. The roads were narrower. The trees leaned closer. And silence wasn't just the absence of noise. It was a presence that pressed against her skin, thick and damp like breath held too long. As she walked past the crooked porches and sagging mailboxes, She could feel it, every curtain twitching, every shadow shifting. They weren't just watching, they were remembering. Her name wasn't spoken out loud. It was exhaled, like an old curse. Lenley Hale. Some said it in fear, others in warning, and a few with something darker behind their eyes, as if she'd broken a pact by breathing the town's air again. Kids were pulled inside. Wind chimes stilled. Even the church steeple seemed to bow as she passed. Lenley didn't flinch, didn't slow, because she knew this town never really forgets. It waits, and now that she was back, the waiting had stopped. Something had begun. And somewhere in that tight-lipped silence, a question pulsed beneath every stare. Why now? Why her? What did she bring back? They say when someone returns to Elder's Hollow, the dead start listening again. The second Lenley Hale unlocked that rotting front door. A cold draft swept through the valley like a sigh held for decades. Dust clung to the walls like memories refusing to be buried. The house hadn't aged, it had waited. And in that waiting, something had changed. In the attic, the old portrait of her mother, burned at the edges, was turned to face the wall. The cellar door, nailed shut by her grandfather, had fresh scratch marks no animal could have made. Even the crows perched on the fence didn't caw, they just watched. Lenley didn't speak a word, but the town felt it. Something was waking up inside that house. Not rage, not grief, a reckoning. And it all began the moment she placed the wooden box on the kitchen table, exactly where her father made her swear, as a child, to never return. But she had, because the oath wasn't finished. And some promises don't die just because people do. What was inside the box wasn't just a secret. It was the key to everything that came next. The Winthrop estate still stood, but just barely, its bones brittle, its breath shallow. Vines crawled up the facade like veins on a dying hand, and shattered window panes glinted like jagged teeth beneath the moonlight. The gate, once wrought iron pride, now groaned as Lenley pushed it open, shrieking like it remembered her sins. The front door didn't creak. It simply opened as if it had been waiting. As if the house had known she'd return exactly 27 years later. Down to the hour. The air inside was wrong, not just cold, but aware. Wallpaper curled off the walls in long, curling ribbons like old skin. The chandelier above the grand foyer hung by a single wire, swaying with no breeze. Everything was exactly where they had left it, except it all felt reversed. The staircase seemed steeper. The shadows fell the wrong way. Even the floorboards groaned in unfamiliar patterns beneath her boots, like the house no longer recognized her as its own. And yet it welcomed her, because the house didn't forget. It watched. And the moment Lenley crossed that threshold, the lock clicked softly behind her. Not to keep intruders out, but to keep the past in. What she would find upstairs was not memory. It was a message. Lenley didn't sleep that first night. Not even close. The kind of silence that filled the Winthrop estate wasn't peace, it was pressure. The wind howled through the shattered window frames like something angry was circling the house. Not outside it, but through it. Drafts slipped beneath doorways like invisible fingers brushing the floor. And then footsteps. Bare. Deliberate. Upstairs. They moved slow, like whoever or whatever it was didn't care if it was heard. Lenley froze, her breath catching mid-chest. She was alone. She had locked every door herself. The steps didn't stop. They moved with the weight of memory. Not a person like the floorboards were remembering old routines on their own. She pressed her ear to the wall beneath the staircase. Step. Pause. Step. No voices. Just the eerie rhythm of feet that shouldn't exist. The heater was off. But the air felt hot suddenly, like breath on the back of her neck. She turned. Nothing. But the lights flickered once, then went dead. In total blackness. She reached for her phone, but the battery, fully charged minutes ago, now read 1%. Something here was draining more than just energy. This wasn't a haunted house. It was a haunted memory. And she was now inside it. Tomorrow, she would go upstairs. But tonight, the house wanted her to listen. The next morning, with barely a flicker of sleep behind her, Lenley wandered into the room that once belonged to her mother. Dust coated everything like a second skin, and the air smelled of dried roses and something else, something iron and bitter. The mirror above the dresser, warped with age, stood untouched for decades, or so she thought. As she wiped the grime from the glass, her breath caught in her throat. There, smudged faintly in crimson-brown streaks, was the outline of a hand not hers, not new, but recent enough to unsettle the soul. Just below it, scrawled in charcoal, raw and uneven, as if dragged by someone trembling or in pain, were the words "Oaths cannot be undone." She staggered back. Her mind raced. No one knew she had returned, not even the town sheriff. Yet here was a message written in a script that felt older than time, urgent as if left only for her. Her eyes scanned the room, pulse thundering in her ears. Something about that sentence, a vow sealed in blood, carved into glass, wasn't just a warning. It was a reminder. And the mirror, with its sickly reflection and bloodied handprint, didn't reflect her anymore. It reflected the past. Whatever promise had been made in this house had never truly died. And now, it wanted its due. That's when things began to spiral. The whispers weren't just inside the house anymore. They echoed through the woods, beneath the floorboards, and inside her dreams. Each night clawed deeper into her sanity, unraveling what little certainty she had left. Something in Elder's Hollow wasn't resting. Something had waited for Lenley's return, and soon, it would make itself known. The longer Lenley stayed, the more the house began to breathe. Not in metaphor, but in cold, bone-chilling exhales that crept from the basement vents and slithered across the floor like invisible serpents. Every mirror fogged over, but not from dust or time. It was as if someone, or something, was breathing on the glass from the inside. At night, the windows pulsed, not with wind, but with the rhythm of something ancient and awake beneath the floorboards. The wooden walls groaned, not from weather, but as if they were reacting to her thoughts. Every creak felt like a footstep. Every shadow refused to disappear. And the worst part, the house didn't just feel alive. It felt aware, watching her, responding to her fear. And when she finally touched that fogged mirror again, her fingers met warmth, skin warm, as if someone else had touched it first. Elder's Hollow wasn't haunted in the way stories warned you. It was bound, breathing, waiting. And Lenley had just stepped into the mouth of something that never forgot. Something that never forgave. Something that was only just beginning to stir. In town, the silence was louder than any scream. People pulled their children close when Lenley walked by. Conversations died the moment she entered a room. Even the dogs stopped barking, as if they'd been warned long ago to never alert the cursed. At the local store, the only place left with working lights and a heartbeat behind the counter, she bent down to grab a can of beans, and that's when she heard it. A whisper, dry and urgent, A boy, no more than 10, standing behind the potato sack display, eyes wide and trembling. He didn't look at her. He just said, "You shouldn't have come back. They've been waiting. Your blood. It's enough now." Then he vanished, like smoke in wind. No one else acknowledged it. The clerk wouldn't meet her eyes, and the receipt printed blank. The entire town felt rehearsed, like a performance made for her return. But the script was ancient, and she was not the one directing it. Elder's Hollow hadn't just remembered her. It had been built to remember, and her presence wasn't a return. It was a trigger, one they'd buried with salt and silence, until now. She waited until nightfall. No lights, no distractions, just the sound of floorboards settling and the whisper of trees clawing at broken windows. Lenley sat alone at the old dining table, the wooden box in front of her like a wound that never closed. Its lock had no keyhole, just the imprint of a thumb. Her thumb. When she pressed down, the box clicked open like it had been holding its breath for 27 years. Inside, there was no dust, just silence. A ceremonial blade, blackened with age but sharp as betrayal. A scroll of ancient parchment, yellowed and brittle, but unmistakable, her name written in blood. Not ink, not paint. Blood. Still red. Still alive. And wrapped carefully beside it, a tarnished silver chain holding a strange pendant, a 6-pointed star but broken in half. Like something had tried to erase it, or feared what it represented. Her hands trembled as she held it. The metal felt warm, breathing. And for the first time, she felt something she couldn't name, not fear, not sorrow, but recognition. This box wasn't a keepsake. It was a contract, and opening it wasn't a choice. It was the final step in a vow she never remembered making. There are stories that crawl beneath your skin, but this one bleeds through the cracks of time. What Lenley discovered next didn't just shatter the rules of her reality, it rewrote them in blood. As the past clawed its way back, what had been buried refused to stay dead, and what lived beneath Elder's Hollow had been waiting. What happened in the cellar changed everything. In a hidden compartment beneath the cellar floor, Lenley uncovered the truth that shattered every story she'd ever been told. The Winthrop bloodline had forged a covenant sealed in blood and bone back in 1764. Not just myth, not folklore. A literal pact inked in a dying man's vein and bound to the soil of Elder's Hollow. To keep plague and ruin away from the town. One soul from each generation bearing the blood of the Oathmaker had to be sacrificed. It wasn't protection, it was payment. Lenley wasn't just back for closure. She was back because the town had counted her blood. The whispers weren't warnings, they were reminders. And that locked wooden box, it wasn't holding relics, it was holding her fate. Everything she thought was superstition was law. What if the people she thought were protecting her were just making sure she stayed long enough to finish the contract? And what if she was the last name on the list? She thought her mother had died protecting her. But the truth was far more cruel. Lenley found the burned remnants of an old journal beneath the fireplace bricks, pages half gone. But one line still scorched into the paper. I couldn't give them my soul, so I gave them hers. Her mother hadn't just fled the blood pact, she'd traded her own daughter to escape it. The moment Lenley was born, she became collateral. A living IOU for a town addicted to safety, bought with sacrifice. Every lullaby, every bedtime story, every prayer whispered under moonlight, it was never love. It was a countdown. The reason the town had watched her return in silence wasn't fear. It was relief. The debt was due, and she was the only one left to pay it. Her whole life hadn't been a series of choices, it had been a funnel. designed to lead her right back to this cursed soil. She wasn't returning home. She was walking straight into a ritual sealed in betrayal. And now, the question wasn't if she would die. It was how. It hit her like a wave breaking through rusted gates, memories she hadn't remembered forgetting. The mirror. The blood. The chanting in a language no child should understand. She was 7, standing barefoot in the attic, a pinprick on her finger dripping onto cold glass. Behind her, a woman in a black dress, face pale, eyes clouded like dead pearls, whispered in a voice made of smoke, "Your blood will keep the valley alive." Lenley had thought it a nightmare, a child's fever dream buried beneath bedtime fears. But now she knew. That whisper wasn't fantasy, it was prophecy. The symbol carved into the attic beams, the locked room no one spoke of, the old hymns her mother hummed with shaking hands. They weren't traditions, they were instructions. Every thread of her past, every fractured glimpse, led to one truth: her life had never been her own. She wasn't born. She was summoned. And the valley, the townspeople, even the trees, they'd all been waiting for the blood to return. Her blood. The blood promised. The blood that must spill. And now, the mirror was calling her back. She descended into the basement, each step heavier than the last, the air thick with dust, rot, and something far older, something watching. The light from her flashlight flickered, then steadied, revealing walls covered in symbols no language class could explain, etched, burned, carved deep into the stone like they were alive. In the center, beneath a crumbling arch, sat a stone chair. Not a chair. She realized an altar. Its surface was worn smooth from bodies pressed against it. Iron restraints, rusted but intact, curled from the arms like claws waiting to snap shut. Dried streaks of brown traced paths down the legs of the slab, evidence of what had been taken. Lenley felt her pulse drum in her ears. This wasn't just a family secret, it was a machine, a mechanism built to bind and bleed. Her family hadn't protected the town. They'd fed it. This room wasn't forgotten. It was preserved, maintained, ready. And the worst part, there was no dust on the chair. Someone had cleaned it. Someone had been waiting. The markings began to hum, and the floor beneath her feet breathed. She turned toward the antique mirror, leaning crookedly against the far wall, cracked, dust-coated, but somehow gleaming with unnatural clarity. At first, she saw herself trembling, wide-eyed, breath fogging the glass. But then, her reflection shifted. It didn't blink when she did. It didn't flinch. Instead, it smiled. Not a warm smile. A slow, deliberate, crooked grin full of knowledge she didn't have and memories she didn't want. Her own mouth stayed shut. But in the mirror, her twin raised a finger and tapped once, then smeared it down the glass, leaving a bloody trail. It wasn't copying her. It was mocking her. The longer she stared, the more the figure in the mirror grew confident, tilting its head, mouthing words Lenley couldn't hear but somehow understood. You were always meant to come back. Her knees buckled, her stomach clenched. What if the reflection wasn't her at all? What if it never had been in that moment? She realized something had crossed over, and whatever it was, it wore her face like a mask. The mirror pulsed. Then, it whispered her name. Lenley ran not up, not out, but deeper into the house, as if something inside her already knew the exit was no longer an option. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding with each heartbeat she couldn't calm. The symbols on the floor glowed faintly now, reacting to her presence like heat to skin. The ritual had begun again, not with a ceremony, but with her return. Every step echoed a memory she didn't make but somehow carried. The shadows weren't just dark, they were watching. As she reached the base of the staircase, the house groaned like a creature waking from a long, bitter slumber. In her hand, the necklace pulsed like a second heartbeat. The mirror behind her cracked. A voice not outside, not in her head, but inside her blood whispered, "Finish what was started." And somewhere beyond the basement, something moved. Something ancient. Something hers. But first, she'd have to face the one thing worse than the curse itself, the truth her mother buried alive. What Lenley saw next would shatter the last thread of doubt, and what followed would demand a choice: her soul, or the valley. With a trembling hand and the ritual blade clenched tight, Lenley swung at the mirror, shattering not just glass, but a centuries-old seal. The blade didn't slice reflection. It carved open something older than the house itself. The instant the mirror broke, a scream erupted raw, layered, impossible. Not human, not animal, but both. It echoed across the entire valley like the wails of forgotten children colliding with the howls of starving wolves. Windows shattered 3 towns over. Birds fell mid-flight. The earth tensed. And then, silence until a low, rumbling cry began to rise from beneath the floorboards, as if the house were mourning its own broken covenant. The air reeked of iron and rot. Every candle extinguished itself. Lenley fell to her knees, ears bleeding, unable to breathe, her vision fracturing like the glass at her feet. But in that moment, the mirror fragment showed her one last image, her younger self, chained to the ritual chair, whispering, "You were never meant to leave." She had ended the cycle but awakened what was waiting beneath it. And now, it was coming. With her breath ragged and her mind on the edge of collapse, Lenley raised the ceremonial blade once more, not to fight, but to defy. She sliced into the center of her palm, crimson blooming like a final vow. Dragging her shaking hand across the cold stone wall, she carved a single word in blood: "No." As the letters dried, the house shuddered. Not creaked, not moaned. It convulsed, like a living thing tasting rebellion for the first time. The walls pulsed, the lights flared and died. The air thickened with a soundless pressure, as if the house itself couldn't comprehend refusal. From the basement to the attic, the echo of her defiance rippled, warping paintings, bending wood, causing the symbols carved into the walls to drip black. A sharp cry erupted from inside the pipes, a voice that wasn't hers but carried her blood. And then, silence. But the word remained "no," written in defiance, in lineage, in pain. She had broken the pact not with magic, but with will. And yet, deep beneath the floor, something turned. Something remembered. Something refused to let go. By sunrise, the Winthrop house was gone, not collapsed, not burned in the ordinary sense, erased. Where the towering, decaying structure once stood was now a perfect, circular scorch mark, blacker than ash, as if scorched by something older than fire. No debris, no wood, no foundation. Just a haunting emptiness that hummed with unfinished whispers. In the center of the scorched earth sat the wooden box, its lid wide open, its contents gone. Only a smear of blood remained along its inner rim, fresh, wet, impossibly untouched by time or heat. Birds would not fly over it. Grass refused to grow around it. Even the wind held its breath. Locals whispered of a shadow seen walking into the woods just before dawn, barefoot and bleeding, humming a lullaby no one had taught them. And from that day forward, no maps showed the valley. No GPS would load. It was as if the land itself had closed the door, locking behind it something that had almost gotten out. But in the soil, just beneath the surface. The ground still pulsed, waiting. No one in the village speaks of what happened. Not out of fear, but as if the memory itself had been carved out, hollowed, replaced by an eerie calm too quiet to trust. The day the police arrived, they circled the scorched ground with blank stares and broken radios. One officer, pale and visibly shaking, emerged from the cruiser and muttered to his partner, "There's no record, no Lenley Hale in the census. No school, no birth certificate. It's like she never existed." And just like that, her name dissolved from town archives, her house gone from aerial maps, her belongings turned to dust. The grocer who once whispered to her now denies she ever came in. Even the children no longer remember her face, only a faint smell of smoke and the echo of lullabies no one knows the words to. And yet, late at night, a few say they've heard footsteps pacing just beyond the tree line. Some claim the valley hums louder when the moon is full. But no one dares investigate, because what if forgetting her is what's keeping the curse asleep? Weeks after the fire-blackened circle became just another forgotten scar on the land, a little girl appeared on the side of the road. No one saw where she came from. Her feet were bare, her hair tangled with leaves, and in her dirt-smeared hands, she clutched a jagged shard of broken mirror. Her eyes wide, unblinking, reflected things that weren't there. A passing driver slowed, rolled down the window, and before he could speak, the girl looked straight at him and whispered, "My blood's like hers." Then she smiled, faintly, like she remembered something ancient. The driver blinked and she was gone, leaving only the glint of glass and the echo of that chilling sentence in his ears. Later that night, he told the story at the local bar. But no one laughed, because deep down, they all knew the curse had never truly ended. It had just moved, waiting for the next one marked by blood. And somewhere, beneath floorboards, or behind mirrors, the valley was listening again. Some stories don't end, they echo. Lenley's final scream, the blood-written no, the house that vanished, those are more than horror tropes. They are reminders. Reminders that sometimes the things we inherit are not heirlooms, but curses dressed in silence. If you've ever felt like something followed you, like your reflection wasn't quite right, maybe, just maybe, your story isn't yours alone. And if this tale made you shiver, pause, or question reality even for a second, then don't let it vanish like Lenley did. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think the girl with the mirror meant? Save this video so you don't forget the signs, and hit subscribe because what's coming next, you won't want to face it alone.